You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hi guys, I'm Teresa Tang. You know what I've been thinking about a lot this week? The comments section. Yeah, that feature on social media that's meant to invite dialogue, democratize the online space. You can say nearly whatever you want in those small boxes. And that's partly the problem.
ஹாய் அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். ஸோ நாளைக்கு Day 1 விசா UPM சிறடாங்கில் 6 மணிக்கு மேலே ஒரு நிகழ்ச்சி நடக்குதுங்க.
That's a TikTok from the account of a 30-year-old Malaysian influencer known as Aisha. She was pretty popular, posting product reviews, herself dancing, the usual stuff. I say was because she died in July. She reportedly took her own life after being harassed online. And that is where we're picking up the story. CNA Correspondent Afifah Ariffin has been looking into violence against women online and why it's become such a dangerous place for people like Aisha. Hi, Afifah.
Hi, good morning.
I was scrolling through Aisha's TikTok account preparing for this episode, and the comment section, it's filled now with messages of condolence over a life cut far too short. What was your reaction when this story first broke in Malaysia?
When the story first broke, I think I was shocked, just like everyone else. I went to Aisha's social media accounts and saw that she's what we call a huge influencer, right? She has hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, tens of thousands of followers on Instagram. And we hear of these cases of people taking their own lives after being bullied either online or in person. But this one, I guess, hits a bit close to home because it's happening in Malaysia. It's not the first case of, someone taking their own lives because of cyberbullying, but I guess it's just been amplified because she is a major influencer in the country. So it is a very stark reminder of how vulnerable women are in this digital space. The constant harassment that she faces online is something that a lot of women experience, but we don't always talk about it. And then when we learned about the cyber bullies, that they were arrested and then sentenced to a mere 100 ringgit fine, that's about 30 Singapore dollars, 20 something US dollars. It's so insignificant. So the sense of injustice in that case was very overwhelming, especially when the punishment for those responsible were very insignificant.
You spoke to Aisha's mother and her sister as well. They say they can't sleep. They desperately want to see her again. So clearly it's not just the victim who suffers, it's their families as well. What stood out for you when you met them?
I think one of the most difficult things I find about my job is talking to the families of victims. I've done so many interviews like this, right, in so many disaster zones and all that, and that's really the hardest part, seeing the toll it takes on families who've just lost their loved ones. With Aisha's mother and sister, I visited them about 2 months after Aisha died. You could still feel their pain, their anger. They couldn't understand why their daughter had to go through this and why the people who were responsible weren't being held accountable. The psychological impact on Aisha's mother, we'll see in the episode, is so profound. She cannot sleep, she keeps reliving the loss, the fear, and that sense of helplessness of not being able to do anything to help her youngest child. And these women, like many others, are of course part of a system that doesn't or is not able to fully protect them. And that emotional aftermath is something that often gets overlooked in discussions about online violence.
There's a global report from the Economist Intelligence Unit, and it found that in 2021, 85% of women have experienced online violence. In other words, if you're female, you're almost guaranteed to have gone through some sort of negative experience in the digital space. Afifah, why is that? Why is there this gender bias?
I think in general, online or offline, there is gender bias. I think women face a ton more discrimination than men. But I think it's more pronounced online because people can hide behind their screens, what we call keyboard warriors, right? But this whole idea of online violence against women is something that's very deeply rooted in gender inequalities. It's not just about the abuse itself, but also the power dynamics at play. And women who speak out, who take up public spaces online, they become very easy targets for hate speech, for harassment, doxing, and threats of violence. We saw things like circulation of unwanted images or sexually explicit content. And all these are sort of designed to silence women and punish them for existing in these digital spaces and for being brave enough to speak out about things. And so what it leads to is that there is this need for a gender-sensitive approach in addressing these issues, because as we know, violence is often uniquely gendered, especially online, where we're focusing on things that are targeting, for example, women's bodies, women's voices, women's rights to opinions. So in this episode, I spoke with two influencers in Malaysia. One of them is Shakila Zen. She is an activist who speaks out about environmental issues ranging from climate change to calling out immoral corporations. But she also talks about Sharia laws in the country and also what it means to be a Malay Muslim woman in this day and age in Malaysia. The other one is Nandini Balakrishnan. She's a writer and producer. She has tens of thousands of followers on social media. And I asked them at any point, because of what they did, because of what they said online, whether they felt that their lives were in danger. And here's what Nandini said.
I used to feel safe in Malaysia.
Yeah.
I used to feel safe wherever I live, right? I live in fear. That is that's it. Because no matter what, right, we're never going to stop saying the things we say. But people will always say, oh, that's just the risk that comes with like you putting yourself out there.
Let's talk about the laws in place in Malaysia that are meant to police this online space. Clearly, it doesn't make a lot of people feel safe. Are these laws not robust enough? Are they not enforced? What's the issue here?
Well, Malaysia does have laws in place, your Communications and Multimedia Act, but none of these laws are specifically tailored to address cyberbullying and online violence in a meaningful way. And as a result of this, the penalties can be far too lenient, as we saw in Asia's case, because her perpetrator, Shalini, was only given a 100 ringgit fine, and the cause was for using abusive language on TikTok. It didn't even address the cyberbullying part of it. But of course, because of how big this case has blown up, the government is starting to take more action. In August, we saw that the government is mandating all social media companies with more than 8 million users in the country must apply for a license in a couple of weeks in December. They will also be tabling an online safety bill that sort of comprehensively addresses any sort of like online violence, hate speech, child safety online. So these laws that are going to be tabled, they must be comprehensive. The enforcement of them must be stronger, especially when it comes to protecting women's safety online. In this episode, I also spoke to an activist, Rizana Rezwan. She's the founder of Monsters Among Us. So let's listen into what she said.
As of current, our laws do not statutorily define cyberbullying or bullying. That means there isn't protection, there isn't a way to prevent, and we cannot think of mechanisms to offer support for those who have been victimized by bullying and cyberbullying.
I was reflecting on this topic, and I think women know that online, offline harassment, it exists, but maybe they don't think it will happen to them. And I know that was me. In 2018, I was taking the train in Singapore here. I was sitting down, I was minding my own business, when I hear this guy who was across from me, and he was yelling at the older man who was sitting next to him, and he was saying, "Delete those photos. Why are you taking photos of that girl? Who are you sending it to?" So apparently, Afifah, this older man who was across from me, he was taking photos of me without my knowledge. This was obviously offline. I wasn't physically harmed, but I still felt so violated. I did go to the police, I filed a report, but nothing came of it. And so I wonder if some victims are reluctant to put their experiences on record because what's the point?
Yeah, that's a great point, Teresa. And I'm so sorry this happened to you. But like yourself, many women, they feel this kind of harassment online or offline happen to them on almost a daily basis, right? You've felt it. I've had being harassed on the streets, or even as public figures or people who appear on television. We get comments online where people are just bashing us for no reason, right? You know, picking out what we say or what we wear or how our hairstyle is or what color lipstick we choose to wear that day. The thing is, many women feel very disempowered to report harassment, whether online or offline, or even abuse, because they think nothing will come out of it. There are also concerns about things like victim blaming or retaliation. And in many cases, women don't report because they fear being further silenced or stigmatized. And when the legal system doesn't quite offer adequate protection or justice, I think it only reinforces that feeling.
It's not enough, though, to expect the government to protect you and to protect me. Women, we need to know how to protect ourselves as well, be armed with those tools so that we know what to do if we find ourselves in a bad situation. What have you learned during the course of covering this story?
I think one thing we need to do is empower ourselves with information. How we can navigate online spaces safely is very critical. Of course, protecting women and what women do alone isn't enough. There also needs to be a conscious effort for the men too, for everybody in the world to understand how the online spaces work. Digital literacy is really important. You need to learn how to recognize red flags. You need to be able to learn how to block abusive users, protect your own personal information. That's really important. And just understanding your rights online, right? And then comes the knowledge of how to act when a certain incident of abuse happens. You need to be able to be brave and continue speaking up. So as much as policies need to change, there need to be tougher laws to protect women and also children, we need to see that cultural shift where women know their worth and they feel a lot more confident in asserting their boundaries. So here's Firzana Rizwan again talking about the kind of holistic approach that we need to take.
Normally what adults would say, get off the platform. I'm going to take the phone from you. I'm going to restrict your data. But that doesn't encourage conversation about how young people can gather information so that they can make informed decisions online.
You sat down with and spoke to influencers like Aisha who face risks every time they log on, really. Why is it worth it to them? Why is it worth risking their mental and possibly physical safety?
Yeah, so the two influencers that I had a conversation with, and I mentioned earlier, Shakila, she shared a very interesting story about how in the course of her speaking up, someone sent her a severed hand painted in red outside her house.
A severed hand?
Yes, a severed doll hand. Sorry, I just needed to clarify that. Not a human hand, a doll hand. And she got it, and then it had a threatening note saying that, I know where you live, I will come and kill you and your family as well. So very violent language. And when she went to the police station, the police essentially said that there was nothing much she can do. She can file a report and then they will investigate. And on her end, she had to install CCTV cameras around her home, her parents' home as well, her sister's home as well. So she was very much under psychological stress, right? You don't know when this is going to happen again. Whoever who sent her that threat is still out there and there's nothing that can be done. And I think for normal people, if we were to get a threatening parcel like this, it would be enough to silence them. But Shakila still continues to do so because she feels that it's important for her to keep championing causes to empower women. And it's the same as Nandini. Both of them told me that regardless of the threats that they get online, that they will still continue to do this job because people need to. And the stronger that women are online and the more women band together and have a stronger, louder voice, then the easier things will be.
Yeah, I guess if you stay silent, it really means that those perpetrators have won.
Yeah.
Your story focused on Malaysia, but it really could be told in nearly any other country in the world. This is a big question, but why do you think global patterns of discrimination so entrenched in our world?
I think discrimination against women is just very deeply entrenched culturally, socially, institutionally, in all the structures around the world. Whether it's Malaysia or, as we'll see in this episode, France, Pakistan as well. And these patterns are rooted in gender inequality that has been normalized for centuries, right? It's not about laws, it's about mindset. So in Pakistan, for example, women face harassment on public transports simply because their systems just don't prioritize their safety. And so the global conversation must shift from viewing these issues as isolated to seeing them as interconnected. We need a collective effort to change societal norms around the world.
Yeah, as you say, mindsets have to change. Everyone has to agree that this normalization of abuse, of harassment, it's not okay. So having spoken to so many women, advocates, politicians, how hopeful are you? Do you think we'll see online and offline environments become safer in the years to come?
I think I am cautiously optimistic. We've seen progress, right? Especially in raising awareness. We know that more people are talking about these issues, and that's a first step towards change. We're seeing the authorities making policy changes, better enforcement of laws. And we can generally see a shift in societal attitudes towards women's rights. But we still have a long way to go. As we know, changing mindsets, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a long road. But I do believe that with continued pressure, advocacy, activism, we might make online and offline spaces a lot safer for women.
Yeah, I really hope I'll be able to sit down with you again one day. We'll have another episode where we talk about where women feel confident and safe, both in online and offline worlds. Thank you so much, Afifah.
Thank you, Teresa. I hope we can chat soon enough.
And you can watch Afifah's report on YouTube as well as on CNA.Asia. And don't forget, every week there are new episodes on TV of the CNA Correspondent program. That's every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. The team behind this week's episode is Saya Win, Claire Ong, Crispina Robert, Craig Dale, and myself, Teresa Tang. Thanks for joining us.